and welcome to the second day of the GCRF AgriFood Africa East virtual mission. My name's Jane Brookman and I work for the Knowledge Transfer Network, or KTN. Now, a reminder that our presentations are pre-recorded, but you can follow these with a live Q&A session. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please type your questions for the speakers in at your convenience. We will answer as many as we can in that Q&A session after the presentations. Don't forget to use the Twitter hashtag AgriFoodAfrica. And if you need any help from the KTN team, contact us on the gcrf.agrifood@ktn-uk.org email address. This morning, we have Russell Biosolution. We have presentations on biorational pest solutions, intra-African agricultural trade, and financial options available for smallholders in Eastern Africa. So without further ado, go to the first presentation from Naeem Hassan, Managing Director of Russell Biosolutions Limited.
Good morning. My name is Naeem Hassan. I'm from Russell IPM. I will talk about biorational attack and kill control system for the control of fruit flies. I would like to say a few words about Russell IPM. Russell IPM is one of the leading manufacturers of biorational pest and disease control product. We are in the market over 30 years. We have been awarded Queen's Award for Innovation 3 times in 2011, 2012 and 2018. We market our product over 80 countries worldwide. We have been working on fruit flies last 15 to 20 years. So we applied for a grant in Agritech Catalyst latest stage round 2 projects in 2016, and we awarded the projects with a good number of partners, 11 partners, and we worked in 4 countries in Asia and Africa. The project was to demonstrate that biorational attack and kill system can control fruit flies without a spraying blanket spray of chemicals. During the course of the project, we conducted 49 trials, around 15 farmers' day, 12 seminars, hands-on training days for the farmers, and it was a successful project. At the very end, we managed to register the product in 3 territories among the 4 we worked on. Now, why fruit fly is so important? Fruit fly is a concurrent problem in fruit-growing regions. It is a serious threat to the fruit growers. There are, in literature, over 5,000 species has been reported, arranged into 500 genera, and among these 575 fruit fly species are economically important. The damage has been reported 30 to 80% if no control measures were applied. Apart from direct damage to the crop, fruit fly also has posed other indirect damages. Those countries where fruit fly is not present, there it is an invasive species, and the fruit growers must ensure that their commodities are fruit fly free. Therefore, it is imperative for a fruit growers that without this documentation that the fruit fly has been substantially controlled and the commodities is fruit fly free, they cannot export to the lucrative markets. It could often use a bargaining chip in many talks. Therefore, the post-harvest treatment comes in the practice. After harvesting the fruits, it needs to go through the hot water treatment to make sure that fruit fly free commodities move from one country to other countries. Now, these are the typical damage signs. Fruit fly female lay the eggs underneath of the skin of the fruits, and the young larvae hatched. They eat the fruit flesh and make it soft. Often fruit drops prematurely, and then once larvae finish eating from the inside, they drop to the ground. Therefore, we developed a control system based on attract and kill system. Attract means you attract fruit fly through an potent attractant, then kill it with the contact of a pesticide. And these systems we develop for female fruit fly control, male fruit fly control, and the pupal population on the ground. Therefore, we call it 3D approach, 3-dimensional control systems. Our system is based on the female one, composed of hydrolyzed protein, where fruit fly requires protein before the egg laying, and they become desperate to have a protein source to eat something contains proteins. And the male is attracted to methyl eugenol and other food volatiles. So we hang the fruit fly dispensers. To give you the system works like this. Fly get excited and attracted towards the bait station, which contain hydrolyzed protein and alpha cypermethrin, a pyrethrin, which they brings the fly in contact. Once they touch it, they're dead. This is for female. And for male, we have systems where a wax emulsion formulation. I will switch on the visual video, which will help you to understand. The wax emulsion formulation that contains male fruit fly attractant methyl and abamectin 0.5%. So these flies coming and touching it, getting the lethal dose, either dying immediately or fly away and die. So these flies, those you're seeing around here, they're already dead, and some of them, if you look in the lower leaves, they have been earlier touched it and dead. And if we look on the ground, these also you see also the mortality on the ground. So the systems we are applied various locations, and also we found there is a beneficial microbes called Metrology manisopli, which is very effective to suppress fruit fly pupae on the ground, which fall from the fruit. So we found this microbes is effective against larvae, pupae, as well as. Now, how we apply it? We apply the male and female, like all the female attack and kill applied across the orchards is 100 bait station per hectare, and the male gels around the border. This border we applied it. The idea is to drive all the males from the orchard towards the border, and those who are coming from outside get killed around the border. So we try to deprive female from male. So also we monitor male-female population, and also we get data of healthy fruit and infested fruit from 15 to 20 plants. This is a trial conducted in Kenya in mango orchards, where when the male and female attack and kill system were in place, it reduced fruit fly population substantially. There's another location where around 70% trap catches were down, and the results has got when the population was down, it has a knock-on effect on the infestation. The infestation was only 10%, so 90% fruit was saved. And in farmers' practice, where no control measures were applied or chemical control measures were applied, it was 40% damage. So farmer was quite happy and sharing his data with our fellow farmers. We have seen similar trends in Tanzania, where we worked with business by trade and also Tanzanian Mango Growers Associations. When we applied male and female attack and kill systems in Tanzania, this started in Arusha, 2 locations, we see the damage was about 5 to 6%. It means over 95% control was achieved. Over to Asian countries, where the scenario is slightly different, hot and humid, they were already familiar to the fruit fly traps, but the traps was less efficacious because of the every 3-4 weeks they have to change the lures, and every week changing the water, labor intensive process wasn't very popular. But when we brought this new system where you just once apply it and forget about it, this covers the whole seasons, then farmers was quite interested, and it become very popular. We conducted a trial in mango, guava. Here in guava trial, we managed to reduce population up to 88%. So, and in bitter gourd is a vegetable, where also fruit fly cause a serious problem, Bacteria cucurbitae. In that case, we just change the male side of it. Male attractant, female stays as it is. So we applied the male and female attack and kill system, and we managed to reduce population up to 90%. Then over to Nepal, where the citrus fruit fly, there's a fruit fly called Bacteria minax, which is a major threat to the citrus industry. And once our system was applied, and it reduced the fruit fly population, similar trend like Africa. You see that after 16 weeks, population was down. Then in sweet orange and mandarin, the damage level in mandarin was 5%, and in compared to the farmer's field is 26%, a significant difference. And in sweet orange, over 88% control was achieved. So this is a reduction of fruit flies across the board in Asia, in Africa, and in different crops, in mango, guava, in cucumber tea, and oranges. So success stories here that our system was fast tracked and we achieved registration, and we demonstrate that fruit fly can be controlled up to a small scale level. It doesn't need to be area wide control. We can control the fruit fly infestation half a hectare to 1 hectare level. And biorational systems is an alternative to the chemicals, and it works hand in hand with beneficials. But when you have a localized applications of base stations where only specific fruit fly species is going there, so in that case we can manage the our fruit flies in collaboration with natural predators. And there was a lot of interest from some neighboring countries where fruit fly is a major threat, and we shared our results with some countries in Asia and Africa, especially in Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, where mango is a big cultivation of mango there. So they are interested. So further to the projects, we achieved that overseas partner, especially I would like to give special thanks to the Bangladesh authorities and Bangladesh government. We had a good partnership. Bangladesh Agriculture Research Institute. Agriculture Research Institute work hand in hand with us, and they demonstrate this technology to the farmers, the local authorities. Then Bangladesh government was invested 3.5 million worth of a development projects for 4 years after the completion of our projects. In that, they are developing a system where the biorational systems where we develop for the control of a wide range of pests and diseases. And we've been working together with them in these projects. Until today, we provided training to 51 Bangladeshi scientists and agricultural workers in the UK, and we demonstrate them the technology here in the UK, and also some farms and some research institute in the UK where we are working in collaborations. In this slide, I would like to show that how the grant helped us to access the market. The total grant we received from Innovate UK for 11 partners was around £186,000, and the grant portion for Russell IPM was around 55,000. The sales after completion of the first year of the project was £250,000, which was 4 times more than the grant we received. There were other indirect benefit. Project was conducted in mostly East Africa, but word goes around, and our partners in West Africa come on board. And together with our partners, we bid for Equus fruit fly project, where our project was successful, and we were awarded an order of more than 1.5 million euros, and all for fruit fly control products. Now we applied for registration in these 9 ECOWAS countries. Bear in mind, with first 3 countries before, and with this 9, it will open 12 countries market for us. So at the end, I would like to give special thanks to Innovate UK. These projects was really helped us to open our market in developing countries. The help of Innovate UK was instrumental. Without the help of the AgriTech Catalyst project, for a company like Russell IPM, a SME level company, we could not reach these markets. So again, special thanks to the Innovate UK. And I would like to say other future Innovate UK applicants that these projects really worked for well, and is a good value for money. Though you invest in an earlier stage from your own revenue, but the cost is covered by Innovate UK for SMEs up to 70%, or medium businesses for 60%, but this is a very good value for money. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niam. It was great to learn about your biological and sustainable approach to control fruit flies in Africa and Asia. We are now going to hear Ben Bennett talking about the intra-African agricultural trade. Over to you, Ben.
Hi everybody, my name's Professor Ben Bennett. I'm Deputy Director of the Natural Resources Institute, which is at the University of Greenwich in the UK, and I've been asked today to talk to you for a bit to try to introduce or answer the question, why doesn't inter-regional trade work in Africa? Why doesn't Africa feed itself? So that's the basic question that I'll address in the next 10 to 15 minutes. The desire is there very strongly to boost inter-African trade and encourage agricultural trade between African countries. And this commitment was made by all of the heads of state of the African Union and all of the countries in Africa. And it's written in stone as Article 5 of the Malabo Declaration of 2014. And this declaration commits member states to boosting inter-Africa trade in agricultural commodities and services. Very impressively, it wants to triple by the year 2025, but as we'll see, we're tripling from a somewhat low base. And it wants to create policies and institutions and conditions, support systems to make that work. The desire is certainly there. The reality up until recently has been rather thin on the ground. So you often hear African leaders talking about Africa or bits of African nations as the national breadbasket or the breadbasket of Africa. But actually, at the moment, in recent years, as a continent, Africa is importing substantially more food than it exports. So it's not self-sufficient, though you might argue whether self-sufficiency makes a lot of sense. They export lots of other good things, which they can use the money to buy food. But the performance of African agriculture in terms of exports and imports has not been very good. And the share of global agricultural exports from Africa has been pretty consistently stuck at around 4%. This data only goes up to 2012, so it's a little bit old. And that's one of the challenges you face looking at trade in African agriculture, is that the data is often not very good. So while it might have gone up a little bit more in recent years, this proportion is really very small indeed. So what's the problem? African exports are concentrated on a limited number of traditional commodities. African still exports largely primary goods for processing outside, and it tends to import staple goods for food security. So you can see in these diagrams here that the top African exports by value are cocoa, still, coffee, cotton, and citrus from the agricultural sector. So these have not changed decade on decade for really a very long time, except perhaps with the increase in the price of cocoa. But even so, most of these commodities are processed, and the high portion of the value is added outside Africa, not within it. That's really not a great situation that is still there. In terms of imports, you can see, Africa is a country that produces many of these products, is still importing rice, sugar, maize, milk and cream, meat, fish, and vegetable oil. So exporting relatively high value industrial food commodities, and importing low value commodities that are produced cheaply elsewhere. So how does Africa compare with others? You might say, well, other regions have this sort of problem as well. Well, if you look at this chart here, you can see that the proportion of inter-regional trade within Africa remains stubbornly low. And I put a box around Africa so you can compare it with Europe, for example, where inter-regional trade is a massive proportion of total trade. Whereas in Africa, it's kind of stuck around the 20% mark. So in sum, what are the problems? or what does the data show us? So Africa is massively export dependent, but it's stuff going out of Africa and not traded between African countries. The share of exports from Africa to the rest of the world range from 80 to 90% between 2000 and 2017. The only other region with a higher dependency in the world is Oceania. Inter-African trade lags behind all other regions of the world. Inter-African exports 16.6% of total exports in 2017, compared with 68% in Europe. Inter-African trade, defined as the average of inter-African exports and imports, was around 2% during the period of 2015 to 17, whereas you can see from these figures in Europe it was 67%. The 10 leading intra-African exporters, well, the leading one is Eswatini, which is surrounded by South Africa, so it has to export. Everything that goes out has to be exported, so its percentage is always going to be hard. Namibia, a huge country with a small population, quite successful at exporting fish and a bit of meat byproduct into the region. Zimbabwe, Uganda, Togo, Djibouti, also meat, Lesotho, Kenya, Malawi. Not a very, it's when you get to Malawi, you're already down to 38%. In a landlocked country, it's rather small. The 10 countries with the lowest share, Chad, almost negligible. Some big countries in here. Angola, 3.9%, very small indeed. I've included this picture of a bit of a problem in Lagos. Lagos Harbour when it rains. If you've ever been to Lagos, this is what the harbour road looks like when it rains. It grinds to a halt. So what are countries trying to do about this? So the theory is that you should have trade agreements and you should reduce the friction in trade. So there's an effort to make an African regional continental free trade area. 22 countries have ratified this. That's the yellow countries on this map. 52 have signed the preliminary agreement. The Nigerians have decided not to sign either of these agreements, and as you can see from the graph at the bottom, the Nigerians are the single most important countries. It's very important that they are engaged with at some point. Underlying this is a huge web of different trade agreements and free trade agreements, some of which conflict with each other. So I use as an example here the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a serial joiner of free trade agreements, and this kind of tartan map that you see here shows you the 14 different regional trade agreements that DRC has joined and was in 2018. Each of these trade agreements got separate headquarters and standards and tariffs, and it's enormously complicated and somewhat pointless, as we shall see that DRC doesn't trade very much with its neighbours in any formal sense of the word. Quite a lot informally, but not much formally. And then some of these trade agreements that DRC has also overlapped by international agreements, which are generated by all sorts of pressures. Traditional colonial relationships in some cases, development aid plans such as economic partnership agreements, and then this bottom right-hand map of Africa here with the patchwork on it shows you the existing regional economic communities, RECs as they are called, and the overlapping web of different RECs. It's somewhat messy, shall we say. So, is regional integration working? One of the main reasons for regional integration is to encourage trade between countries. So this data from the African Trade Monitor shows you some of the problems, and I've highlighted DRC because we saw that they're a member of all of those different trade agreements. Have their exports increased? Agricultural exports increased? Share of agricultural trade increased? Well, no, it hasn't. It's stayed the same. Actually, some countries are now exporting less than they exported regionally before. and Zimbabwe is a good example of that. In the 90s, Zimbabwe had a very substantial export trade in agricultural commodities and meat byproducts and other grains, and it's actually heading in the wrong direction, not the right direction. So, has regional integration worked again? Tariffs have been reduced or been taken down by this regional integration, but the problem is that the cost to export is still high. So this graph here kind of illustrates that really well. So you can see that the lines are the tariffs, which have been slowly negotiated down bit by bit. I won't bore you with the difference between applied tariffs and MFN tariffs, but the measures of non-tariff barriers, the cost to export to someone who's moving products across borders out of the continent or between countries, this has gone up at the same time as tariff barriers have gone down. So what has been given with one hand has been taken away with another. So why is it important to have inter-African trade? Well, the theory suggests that that if you can reduce the friction from trade and allow goods to pass between countries, it allows competitive and comparative advantage to come to the fore, and for people to invest and focus on those commodities and products that they have a real advantage in, and then to get scale economies and to move these products across borders to bigger and bigger markets. Africa as a whole is a potential massive market if you could reach all of it. So the theory also goes that this would improve the food balance and encourage self-sufficiency and resilience, because there will be more food locally across different regions and the different geographies and climates to allow some forms of resilience against shock. What stops trade between African states? Well, the key reason that people don't trade traditionally has been tariffs. These are taxes that people pay to move a product from one country to another, and they used to form a really important source of income for countries across Africa. There's been a big effort in recent decades to improve the way that income's collected. So you find value-added tax programs, for example, successfully being implemented. So they're not so dependent on tariffs. So tariffs have slowly gone down. Tariffs are also used to protect domestic industries, to stop goods flooding in from other countries, to allow domestic industries to flourish without non-competitive practices, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for nefarious reasons. The other big thing that stops trade are non-tariff barriers. So these are things like taxes and charges, quality and safety standards, and sometimes called technical issues, import bans, customs and trade facilitation measures, just basically bureaucracy and paperwork and just things that make it very difficult. There's an enormous web of different rules across Africa. So one of these is what's called rules of origin. That's rules that prevent you moving things across a border and claiming that they came from the country that you moved it from when they actually didn't. Very complicated, very arcane, very hard to prove, and sometimes simply stop trade. The absence of infrastructure, ports, roads, railways, policies, price controls and taxes, investment rules, different labour and landlords laws in different countries. In the agricultural sector, something as simple as a national GMO policy can prevent trade, and did famously in 2002 when Zambia denied access to its market for South African maize because they didn't, even though it had been milled, because they didn't have a domestic GMO law that could prevent it. So they just denied it access. Very high transport costs. The cost of containers in Africa is the highest in the world. dangerous and difficult borders, land borders across Africa, on the whole, not fun places to be. Can be chaotic, dangerous, not good at night, inefficiencies in distribution, anti-competitive activities, and so on and so on. There are a huge range of different trade barriers going on. So an example you might find, there's been quite a lot of recent research. ODI have done a good report on non-tariff barriers in the East African community. It's supposed to be a free trade community. Essentially all trade is supposed to be without tax, tariff or tariff, non-tariff barriers. Well, ODI found delays to borders, shortage of weigh bridges, very important for trucks. So at each border you had to queue for hours and hours to get your truck weighed so you could pay a levy, official and unofficial bribes and fines, different road use fees, and simply poor roads, particularly in rainy seasons, making transits very, very poor. ODI estimated that elimination of all non-tariff barriers in EAC could reduce regional poverty by 0.5%. Doesn't sound like very much, but regional poverty is a very hard thing to address. This could tackle it directly. Another example is the absence of any consumer agency, the ability of consumers to take any control over the goods that they receive. So the absence of standards and metrology sounds like a very arcane thing, but if you don't have a weighing scale that works, or a measure that you're sure that that measure is consistent, it does make all aspects of agricultural trade very difficult, and the person that ends up paying for this, or the people that end up paying for this, tend to be the consumers at the end of the day. So what initiatives might help? Improve national policies, increase transparency, systems that increase transparency and reduce transaction costs, better coordination, measures that increase traceability and trust, more and better data. Trade is driven by data and transparency of data, and improved evidence of benefits. If people realized how much the economy could gain by improvement in trade, maybe they'd make more effort to change the laws and the policies. There are a lot of opportunities, and I just give you a few here. There are a lot of trucks moving around Africa that go somewhere with a product in it and come back empty. I discovered in the late 90s an example of this with trucks taking goods from South Africa up to Angola that were going back empty when the Angolans had counter-seasonal onions. It's a picture of people unloading onions on the right-hand side. Cargo space on flights, scale economies, using byproducts. So byproducts tend to be dumped because they're expensive to move from A to B in trucks. So there are opportunities to turn these byproducts into items of value. There are different commodities that have specific, which could be the focus of specific programs in trade within Africa. And in particular, I focus on meat and fish. There's a fishery or aquaculture boom going on in Africa. So trade in fish and fish products could be very interesting. And the same applies to meat, where you've got people interested and getting more income and living in cities are interested to buy meat and meat products, but they are importing them from Argentina and India, when there's a surplus of meat in other countries around Africa. There's a huge opportunity there. It's just two examples. High value agricultural products make life easier than low value ones to get leverage and to get started. What would the benefits of greater interregional trade be? Product and market diversification, domestic value addition, improve resource management, scale benefits, investment. There are so many benefits are in inter-African trade. I could talk about them for an hour, but I won't. I think that's enough for that. That was just a brief and very rapid run through why Africa has not got more into African trade in agricultural commodities and what we could do about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, for your insights on the agricultural trade between African countries. We are now going to hear our last speaker of this session, Rishi Rithatha, that will give us an overview of the financial options available to agri-food producers in Eastern Africa.
Agriculture is the main driver of Kenya's economy, accounting for almost 34% of GDP, and at least 73% of Kenya's rural population rely on the sector as their main source of income and employment. In Kenya, between 10 and 20% of smallholder farmers are part of organized value chains. Tech companies such as Virtual City have been implementing initiatives to digitize the dairy value chain.
As we began to look at what is the problem that we're trying to solve, we ended up spending more time looking at the supply chains. There was very little visibility as to what's happening on the agricultural side and also what's happening on the distribution side. And there the issue was the level of fraud that was happening that was affecting the farmers, where the farmers did not feel that they were getting value for what it is that they were delivering.
Firstly, the milk is collected at the farm gate by transporters or riders, where they weigh the milk and capture the data via their mobile device. The farmer immediately receives an SMS communicating how much milk was received and how much they will be paid. The transporters deliver the milk to the chillers, where the milk is weighed, tested and stored. The chillers then reconcile the data, ensuring what was collected is ultimately delivered to the dairy. The dairy finally processes, packages and dispatches the product. Throughout this process, the back office receives real-time data, making it easy to generate a payroll and enabling farmers to create an economic identity through the issuance of digital receipts and payments via mobile money.
We are able to transfer money to a lot more financial institutions, and we are finding most farmers are preferring M-Pesa.
I, as a farmer, I preferred M-Pesa because at the times they pay me even at night. So if I had no paraffin or fat, I'll just go and withdraw the cash and I'll be comfortable.
Faida yenye nimepata kwa hii huduma ni hakuna senti hata moja inaweza potea. The moment tu niuze maziwa wananilipa ile yenye mimi nimeleta.
Writing may be erased or lost, but if it is in the system, it cannot get lost. Your system inaonekana it is very convenient. It is of transparency and accountability.
In 2019, the GSMA will launch an innovation fund to support projects to digitize the agricultural last mile in developing countries. For further details, please visit our website.
The GSMA represents the interests of mobile operators worldwide, uniting more than 750 operators with almost 400 companies in the broader mobile ecosystem. This includes handset and device makers, software companies, equipment providers and internet companies, as well as organizations in adjacent industry sectors. The GSMA also produces the industry-leading Mobile World Congress events held annually in Barcelona, Los Angeles, and Shanghai, as well as the Mobile 360 series of regional conferences. The GSMA AgriTech program is part of the GSMA's Mobile for Development team, which drives innovation in digital technology to reduce inequalities in our world. Singularly positioned at the intersection of the mobile ecosystem and the development sector, Mobile for Development stimulates digital innovation to deliver both sustainable business and large-scale socioeconomic impact for the underserved. The AgriTech program's vision is to achieve equitable and sustainable food chains that empower farmers and strengthen local economies. Our mission is to bring together and support the mobile industry, agricultural sector stakeholders, innovators, and investors in the AgriTech space to launch, improve, and scale impactful and commercially viable digital solutions for farmers in the developing world. We do this through sharing research and knowledge on best practices, running an innovation fund, and providing technical assistance and brokering partnerships. The key agricultural financing gap worldwide is long-term capital for agricultural needs. Long-term financing enables farmers to invest in assets and expand and improve their agricultural activities, but this hinges on the availability of transactional footprints such as record keeping, either digital or paper-based. However, even when farmers have records, such as physical receipts for the sale of crops to agribusinesses, the absence of standardized records and formats to present this information to financial service providers makes it difficult for them to issue credit. Globally, there is a significant financing gap for all agricultural and non-agricultural needs. The gap is greater in sub-Saharan Africa, largely because a smaller percentage of the population has a bank account. Agritech companies capture a wealth of agricultural data that can support farmers in developing an economic identity. An economic identity is defined as a dynamic citizen profile that captures an individual's life events, assets, and transaction history. A digital footprint consists of farmer-level data, such as transactional data generated by mobile money, farm-level data, such as farming record data in a digital procurement tool, and location-based data, such as satellite data from a smart farming tool. Data can be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured, and may not always be relevant for use in financial services. For example, satellite-based data used for disease monitoring can be combined with weather forecasting data, which could then be used for crop insurance payouts for eligible farmers. As shown in our short video, formal value chains and agri-e-commerce represent ideal entry points for mobile money providers to digitize payments, as they provide strong incentives for buyers to increase transparency, quality, and the predictability of supply. Agricultural value chains have varying degrees of formality depending on the involvement of formal buyers who aggregate and buy crops from farmers. As opposed to informal middlemen-based value chains that are characterized by a high degree of fragmentation in the last mile, formal value chains are structured around agribusinesses and cooperatives that are responsible for crop procurement and aggregation. In our recent report on digitizing payments in agricultural value chains, our analysis found that major value chains suited for digitization in East Africa include milk, oil crops, nuts, tea, and coffee. The potential direct revenue opportunity in this region stands at $88 million as of 2021, which is expected to rise to $125 million by 2025. Ethiopia, which the GSMA's mobile money team has termed as a mobile money sleeping giant, offers the lion's share of this opportunity, followed by Kenya and Rwanda. To launch a credit product for farmers, effective product design requires a good understanding of the cash outflows of rural households. When designing a credit product for the agricultural sector, it is also important to consider the seasonality of farmers' incomes, that is, their cash inflows. Together with this, it is vital to design financial products that are customized to farmers' circumstances, needs, and revenue-generating activities. The farming journey varies between value chains and geography, and user research is required to reveal it fully. Financial service providers must also consider issues like a gender-neutral approach to credit, for example, allowing collateral registered under women's names, loans that cover a range of crops, models that allow access to higher priced items, such as machinery, and transparency in data ownership and sharing. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Well, thank you for those very interesting presentations, and I'd like now to start the Q&A session. I'd like to start first with a question for Ben from Alan Duncan. He says that informal trade, is this measured or at least estimated in official statistics? He's thinking about the fact that he's aware that there's lots of livestock movement across borders, for example. So is there any way that this is accounted for in any of the official statistics? Is that for you, Ben?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Alan, that's a very good question. The nature of informal trade is that rules and laws, such as livestock trade, which can be, completely against the law because it carries disease from A to B. People are doing it by night. They're doing it through the forest, and actually measuring it almost impossible. The only way you can measure it is by trying to work out the kind of negative image of what's gone missing from production and trade, which is, as you can imagine, a very imprecise way of doing things. In fact, the world would be a generally better place if all the informal trade became formal, but wasn't heavily taxed and just moved freely, with people being able to measure it and gather the data. Informal trade in livestock is potentially particularly harmful because of this disease-related issue.
Thanks, Ben. While I've got you on the line, can I also ask a question from Ian Dawson, which is, would you be able to give us your views on the direction of travel for intra-regional trade agreements in a post-COVID-19 economy?
Again, another really good question. I think most of the regional trade agreements were a response to the collapse in the Doha round of agricultural negotiations in the early noughties, which led to a proliferation of regional trade agreements. The direction of travel was, for an Africa-wide free trade agreement. I fear that the energy behind this is now going to be dissipated as countries try to desperately cling on to their own food security in a post-COVID-19 world and look to themselves before they look to trade. And this is very disappointing after a number of years of progress in reducing barriers to trade. So I think we will return to the discourse on food self-sufficiency from the 1990s, and that's that is very disappointing. We need to fight against it. Food self-sufficiency is a false horizon.
Thanks, Ben. So I'd now like to go to Naeem for a couple of questions on his work for Russell IPM. The first of these, Naeem, was how important do you feel the education and extension work is for success of your product in developing countries, particularly if you can put an East African focus on that for me?
Well, it's a very good question. The extension is very vital of this success. In our program, we try to engage some of the extension workers and the local research and the other partners. Like we worked with the mango growers associations. All the associations members are there, so they have their own farmers day, field day, where you can a potential manufacturer or any business can go there and demonstrate and distribute the information, and then it goes to all the growers. So in fact, the extension service is there, But I think it's moreover the growers, moreover the associations, moreover the cooperatives. If they take on board together with extension workers, then it will show the right information flowing through the system. Otherwise, it is only if we rely on only the sub-Saharan Africa or they have a great system, no doubt, but it is will be completed by engaging all partners like agricultural extension workers, grower associations, cooperative, smallholder farmers together, and farmers' days play a vital role to have a success of the technology.
So it's more the larger extension in the informal context rather than the formal extension services. Yeah. I see. Yeah, and another question for you, which is both for you and Rishi in a way, is how accessible, I guess this is a little bit about the price point and the general accessibility, and from a finance point of view, how accessible is IPM's technology to smallholder farmers, and how does this link in with Rishi's point on finance options available to smallholder farmers?
Should I go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. What it is, the product is available through our distributors. We have distributors in the countries, Kenya, Tanzania. Also, we worked in other countries like Zanzibar Island, Uganda, and also some neighboring countries, Zambia, Zimbabwe. We see that product is accessible for the smallholder farmers. The key challenge was to make the product effective for them. And also we make it price worthy, like is affordable. This is the key challenge. But in the project, we demonstrate that yes, because the many programs related to the large scale area-wide applications. So if smallholder farmers in Africa, they're not always necessarily growing the same crop in same places. There's someone growing mango, someone growing maybe maize, someone growing wheat, it's like all over the place. So on that real scenario, we have to cater for them based on their livelihood. So we demonstrate that this product is effective for the need of smallholder farmers. Now getting it, and also is it affordable to them? And we compare a like for like a cost analysis. That product is because if the smallholder farmers cannot afford it, there's no point of bringing all this technologies, nice technology, but which has no use. So we managed, we did an analysis, and in compared to the conventional pesticide applications, which normally farmers struggle to get the pesticide in Africa and use it. There's also a problem. So in traditional market value, our product is affordable and is competitive. And the smallholder farmers can get it from the distributors. And it is a mindset, to be honest. Now is forcing them to go into that. Like, the food safety is a concern. And also some of the smallholder farmers are the part of the contract farmers of the big boys. So they produce for them, and they had to comply with the residue programs. They cannot use pesticide if they like it, or if willy-nilly using it is a restriction. So, and they also gaining the understanding that it is safe for our health, our children, and our livelihood, and also for the wider community. So therefore, I think at the moment, the way the product is available from the distributors, and distributors are well placed. The business talk to the smaller growers, and also it is under their grip. They can afford it, and the commodity they are selling is high value, like the mango or avocado or peppers, whatever they're growing there. Lychees. So these the value of the save they see from the use of the technology, 40% or 30% more yield, it is like a return on investment is feasible for them. They can really understand that.
So it's we always say, don't we, that when you need to make sure that your market is right and the technology is appropriate. Thanks very much, Naeem. That's really helpful. So Rishi, maybe I could ask you, not necessarily obviously to talk about the specific technology, but maybe to consider how the schemes that are available to help smallholder farmers for purchase of items such as the IPM type technology products.
Well, from what we know about pest control for smallholder farmers, I would say our experience is based on what we've seen and heard in West Africa in particular. So I know this is a session in Eastern Africa, but if you'll allow me, I'll draw on my experience of what I've seen in Nigeria, where there's a company called Beat Drone who are using drones to spray farms. The way they're doing it is not so much in a way where they access the smallholder farmer directly, but they've got to go via aggregators or agribusinesses or some sort of intermediary who has access to land where smallholders are working in conjunction with them. And it's done on a contract basis where, depending on the amount of land you have available, you price it accordingly. So Beat Drone in this particular instance, I know they work with Farm Crowdy, which is a platform which crowdfunds for smallholder farmers, as well as Dangote, which is a well-known agribusiness in Nigeria. And these are two different types of businesses. They've got different types of farmers, different amounts of land that the farmers are working on, and so therefore different pricing. But the approach of B to B to C seems to be the one that they've adopted, and certainly it's working because the company has grown over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Rishi. And a couple of questions for you now I've got you on the mic.
Of course.
From Alan Duncan, a question around Ethiopia. So saying that in Ethiopia, the mobile provision is through a state-run company, and he's questioning whether or not you need more than just a state-run company to provide mobile services before digital last mile could really take off within an African state.
Yeah, I think that particular slide really should have a bit of a caveat to it, because we know very well that Ethiopia is a very nascent mobile money market. In fact, our sister team at the GSMA, the mobile money team, has called it a sleeping giant, together with Nigeria and Sudan. So with only one state-run company, of course, it means that there's a bit of a challenge in trying to grow mobile money, especially mobile money for the last mile. However, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there has been a little bit of liberalization where license awarding is concerned. It was in the news not so long ago that other companies would be allowed to bid for telco licenses. If I'm not mistaken, again, I believe Safaricom from Kenya was looking to try and enter the Ethiopian telco market. And I think in the case of someone like Safaricom, who already have a very well-known digital agricultural platform for farmers in Kenya with up to 1 million farmers signed up, that bodes well for a mobile operator to get into the Ethiopian telco space, to try and entrench mobile money, and also to try and provide services, value-added services to smallholder farmers.
That goes on to the next question for you, Rishi, from Simon Holland, which is there a formal mechanism for linking agri-tech companies to mobile companies across the region? So is that a formal sort of platform, for example, or process?
Yeah, so Safaricom on the platform don't provide the services that are available to smallholder farmers themselves. You can get agronomic advisory, you can get seeds through a company called iProcure. I believe the NCBA bank offers loans to farmers, and collateral as well as a safety net for the loans is provided through Acre Africa and Pula, who are two insurtech companies as well. So a number of third-party providers, you could say, are involved in the platform in trying to provide various services that smallholder farmers may need. When I saw that question, I wasn't sure whether it was a case of what do we as the GSMA do as well, and I'm happy to try and have a stab at that. But we have recently run an innovation fund where 8 grantees are being offered up to £220,000. The grantees have to come as a consortium comprising of a mobile network operator, and an agri-tech. Unfortunately, the applications are closed, so I wish you'd asked me this question about 6 months ago. But what I can say is that anyone looking to try and partner with a mobile network operator, we're always happy to talk to you to see what opportunities there are and see how we can potentially broker partnerships.
Thanks very much for that, Rishi. And the very last question, because I think we're slightly over time, but the very last question would be, would you like to comment on what trends you are seeing with Internet of Things products for farmers?
That's a good question. I think this is a growing area. A number of companies have taken a stab at trying to develop products that can either serve smallholder farmers or that are being sold to businesses who then provide them on to farmers who work with them. One company I would potentially suggest would be Sun Culture in Kenya, who've got a solar-powered rain pump. And they've got a pretty interesting gadget, if I could say. But what often is an issue with technology like this is the cost. It's often a barrier to many smallholder farmers who may not be able to make the investment up front. In certain cases, you might have a scenario where if the money is there, then you also have to make sure that it is the right kind of opportunity cost for you. But I think Sun Culture have got a really interesting model going on. And as far as I'm aware, they've seen at least a certain amount of growth in Kenya. So it'd be worth looking up what they're doing. I hope that answers the question. I think there is a lot more going on in the IoT space, but we find that it's something that you find happening in the odd instance, rather than there being a prolonged or rather a vast trend of IoT-based solutions available. But we do believe that is something we'll see in the near future.
Thanks very much, Rishi. I think that goes back to Naeem's point, which is whether it's an IoT solution or a biological solution, you need to know your market and make sure that your price point is appropriate for the market that you're trying to enter. I'd like to thank all of the speakers this morning for a very interesting session, and I'd like to thank all of you watching for really good questions. This afternoon we have our networking session, so please make sure that you hook into that. And tomorrow we are back again with our showcase in the UK and the pitching session tomorrow afternoon. So thank you very much for everybody at the KTN as part of the GCRF AgriFood Africa East virtual missions. Thank you. Bye-bye.